Hey Morningstar, I don't know about you guys, but I'm struggling with the whole Thanksgiving thing this year. Everything seems a little kind of wacky. The fact that my family is celebrating on Friday instead of Thursday for the first time ever is actually the easiest part of everything to swallow. Filming this blog on Tuesday morning, just a little over 12 hours since the grand jury issued a no true bill saying that there wasn't enough evidence to support an indictment of Officer Darren Wilson. I struggle in my soul because I watched the St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney Robert McCullough from the warmth and relative safety of my home in Lake St. Louis. I struggle because I went to bed and slept pretty soundly last night as violence caught fire in Ferguson. I struggle because I dropped off my son at what I deemed to be a pretty safe suburban public school this morning, as many city school districts are actually deeming it potentially jeopardizing to the safety of kids and have shut down. I struggle because I filmed this blog in my church office while many throughout the city are wondering if they're going to be safe driving to and from work today, doing work in their places of business. I struggle with what will be a relatively normal day, probably, of working with our other pastors to finalize our preaching calendar for next year and other meetings that I have, while many of my peers, pastors down in the city, are going to be on the front lines, dispersing hope and peace, opening their buildings and ministering to those seeking to find some respite and sanctuary in this crazy time. I struggle because there's a part of me that wants to be down there in the midst of all the protest, being there as a person of peace. But honestly, there's an even bigger part of me trying to rationalize staying out of the fray and how to support efforts for peace behind the lines. And as I reflect on all this kind of internal angst, God's begun to reveal the real reason for my struggle. And it's the fact that I really don't have any control over any of this, that I don't have any answers, that I don't even know the very best way to respond in all this. God's also reminded me how very little I know about the deeper realities of race and prejudice and fear that still run deep in cities like St. Louis, and how living in the suburbs can blind me to stories I hear on the news nearly every single evening, and how I all too often just neglect paying attention to that gnawing in my soul as I tell myself, it's not my issue, it's not my concern. So as for me, I'm going to spend a little more time in prayer this week, listening to what God not only wants me and Morningstar Church to do in response to this particular situation in Ferguson and the entire St. Louis metro area, but I think just as importantly, what we need to do, who God needs His church to be in the coming weeks and months and years, to not let this incident merely come and go and just kind of be swept under the rug, but to be part of a true healing that simply must come, the work that needs to be done in our community, in our city, through the churches, where churches can take the lead so that Ferguson, the next time that kind of issue comes up in our community, we'll be prepared. We'll handle it a lot differently, and we'll model shalom, God's peace that He wants to reign in and through our land. And I guess since my family isn't celebrating Thanksgiving until Friday, I'll have an extra day to spend even more time with God in prayer. Hey, all that said, please know how very thankful I am to be the pastor of Morningstar Church, to be in mission and ministry with such incredibly gifted and committed staff, and you, the congregation, followers of Jesus Christ who are dedicated to truly making a decisive impact in our community, in our world, and even right here in ourselves. So let's continue to really be the church this week. And I'll see you in worship this weekend as we begin a very timely Christmas series entitled Disturbing the Peace. God bless you guys, and happy Thanksgiving.